These are pictures coming to us now from the White House, where the leaders of Sweden and Finland are meeting with President Biden today. It comes a day after both countries formally applied to join NATO. So far, the only member to express opposition is Turkey. The president brushed off questions by reporters about the objections, saying, quote, "I think we're going to be okay." Elisabeth Braw joins us now for more on all of this. She's a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, where she focuses on national security and the global economy. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me.
So why Turkey? Why are they opposed to expanding NATO to include these countries?
I think that's what every NATO member state is asking. Everything seemed fine until the moment Sweden and Finland applied, at which point President Erdogan said, well, hang on, we have concerns. We're not going to approve their membership. I think, it seems to be the consensus that President Erdogan is simply spotting an opportunity for a bit of leverage and for Turkey to get something out of this application that Sweden and Finland have submitted, because Turkey, like every other NATO member state, has to approve it. So why not try to get something out of that? Yes.
So Finland, I know, has a pretty formidable military. So NATO is getting a big boost if they agree to allow Finland to join. If Finland and Sweden are accepted into NATO, how does that change the balance of power and security in Europe?
They are both formidable assets, so they will be once they join. And we should remember they are already closely integrated with NATO. They have been working with NATO for many years. Finland, of course, has enormous expertise in guarding a long land border with Russia and has done so successfully for decades. It also has a fantastic air force, fantastic military intelligence. Sweden has a fantastic air force as well. Of course, it's home of Saab, and also has fantastic maritime capabilities. We should remember has a very long coastline, and as a result also has great experience in guarding its coastline, including against Russian submarine intrusions. And both of them also have a great focus on societal resilience. In other words, the rest of society backing up the armed forces in crisis, which is really important, as we have seen in Ukraine.
Yeah, and for the folks who are history buffs out there, we showed that map showing Finland's border with Russia. Many people may not realize that in 1939, the Soviets invaded Finland. It was called the Winter War. And despite being outmanned, despite being outgunned, and the Soviets having superior firepower, the Finns were able to repel that Soviet invasion after a couple of months.
You know why I think it's important to bring that up, too, is that we know, or it certainly seems as if, experts will tell you, that Vladimir Putin is looking to history. Right, looking to rebuild the greatness.
Yes.
That wasn't Soviet Russia, that was even before that. Yeah. But looking to rebuild the greatness of Russia. And so why wouldn't he look at Finland and go,
So I suspect that Vladimir Putin looks at this expansion of NATO, specifically with Finland as it relates to Finland, as a major blow to what he's trying to accomplish there. And as you know, Elisabeth, these countries, Finland and Sweden, are known in the global political sphere as being neutral. So let's talk about the impact that those two nations would have joining NATO on their international political stances. What would that mean for the rest of the world?
So it clearly is a blow to Russia, as you said, Vlad. It's especially in the case of Finland, major egg in the face of Russia. We should remember that Finland used to be part of Russia, then they gained independence in 1917. In 1939, the Soviets invaded, thinking it would be cakewalk. It was no such thing. The Finns fought back for 105 days, extremely courageously, heroically. And now Sweden and Finland have made the very official choice of joining NATO. It really strengthens NATO because they bring these assets that we just discussed. And also it demonstrates that there is a global or European and North American alliance of shared values, and those countries, yes, they have incredible disagreements at times, but when times are tough, they team up and they feel that together they are stronger than they would be individually. So this is a sign of strength for NATO, and it also makes a big difference for what NATO can do should one of the other countries, member states, be attacked, because Sweden and Finland will be net contributors, not net beneficiaries.
So it certainly seems as if Sweden and Finland, their application for NATO, will be sort of fast-tracked. But one could argue that if Ukraine had been allowed to join NATO, then maybe we wouldn't actually be here at this point. Can you explain to our audience why NATO is much more open to Finland and Sweden than they have been to, say, Ukraine or Georgia.
Well, Finland and Sweden are really extremely lucky. They have been thinking for years about whether to join NATO, and they have the liberal democratic values, the good governance, the clean corruption record, the well-managed armed forces to be fantastic candidates. Ukraine struggles in many ways, which is, of course, why a number of NATO member states were concerned about admitting Ukraine as a member before this invasion. And, of course, NATO has as one of its rules not to admit a country that is at war, which makes it impossible for Ukraine to join anytime in the near future. But it is, you could say it's unfair that Ukraine, which desperately wanted to join, wasn't allowed to join before the invasion, and certainly not now, whereas Sweden and Finland, who have sort of been on the fence, are given an extremely warm welcome. But at the end of the day, NATO is about collective defense and mutual assistance to its member states. So it has to look at what are the risks that we bring in inviting countries to join. And clearly, NATO saw a risk in inviting Ukraine. Unfortunately, it worked out in the way that it has, which meant that Ukraine was invaded. It's a tragedy. I don't think, though, that NATO member states could have made any other decision before this invasion.
Elisabeth Braw, thank you very much.